how we can like start looking at nature and what's going on with the sun is actually what's also going on in the digestive.
So the morning time, the breakfast time, is useful for you to stabilize your fire. As it's coming up, you give it a little spark, ignite it a little bit, so that by the time you come to noon, as the sun is at its peak, as our minds are at the most focus, and everywhere in the world, most productive work happens between the hours of 10 and 2. That's when you can indulge in the largest meal.
Do you think that there's a paradigm shift that's happening in the world of wellness?
Life exists on the planet because there's a balance of the sun and moon. The sun brings the heat and the moon brings the moisture. Just these three principles will bring you back home. So we bring warm and moist to everything across the board. That's the first principle. The second principle is live according to the circadian rhythm. And the third principle is the cycles of building, transformation, and decline are natural and normal, and they're everywhere in the universe. Spring will build, summer will transform, winter will decline. As a child, you build. In your youth years, there is transformation, and then there is a decay. Like the first function of food is not to nourish you, it's not even to give you nutrients, but to make sure that the environment of the gut, the climate of the gut does not get damaged.
So are we kind of like the microbiome for the earth?
We are the microbiome for the earth. That's exactly what we are.
Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my debt don't extend me on my dividends.
Okay, so Nidhi, the Ayurvedic doctor extraordinaire.
Thank you. However, I want to say, Frank, just before we started the show, there's so much more I want to talk to you about, but let's see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, instant connection. I love it.
Yeah.
I was sent your Instagram page. And this is like a while back. And within minutes of scrolling, I had already adopted 2 practices into my routine.
Oh my goodness.
That I wasn't doing from just minutes of looking at your page. One was Nasia oil, and the other was rose water in the eyes.
Oh, love it.
And you can see like they're both on my bathroom like shelf now, where I do it as much as I can.
I love it. I love getting those rituals in.
Yeah.
And it's like every day when you come back to your body, you look after your senses. We talk so much about diet and nutrition, so I'm so glad what you picked from my page was beyond diet and nutrition, and you actually went into self-care for your sense organs.
So maybe we can just from the beginning tell people something that they can take home. So let's talk about Nasia first. And for people listening, it's Nasya.
That is correct.
The drops go in your nose. You kind of tilt your head back and do it.
Yes.
Is there a time of day? And also, what is it doing?
Yeah, let's talk about that first, right?
Yeah.
So the one thing, every practice that I talk about, I want to give you the principle. Because if I talk about Nasia today and tomorrow somebody talks about X and Y and Z, you're going to be left with 20 bottles and you really wouldn't know. All you'll know is they're all good for you, but you won't know how they work. So first, let's talk about how they work, right? So we actually neglect the whole region above our neck in terms of how to nourish it. We think about our digestion, we think about our food, we think about our reproductive abilities, but how does our brain get nourished? How do our sense organ get nourished? And more than anything, how does our respiratory system stay on track? So Nasia has benefits for all of this. Nose drops, medicated, instilled into your nostrils. What do they do? So the first thing they do right at the onset is recreate the mucus lining, replenish the microbiome. What oil does, oil is that sweet spot which kind of invites microbes that are lipophilic, which means that they will break down the oil and they will, let's just say it's the sanitizer for your nose. So anything that's airborne disease. Then beyond that mucus lining, it's going to kind of open up everything. Everything that's congested, everything that's corroding, it's going to go and it's going to line all of that. So your breath becomes better. The oil penetrates and goes all the way to the back of your brain. They're studying today, researchers in the West are studying that the only place where there is no blood-brain barrier, which has access to the deepest parts of your brain, like you're talking pituitary, is the nose. So they're studying the use of drug administration through the nasal passages. Something that Ayurveda said, the quote says, Nasa hi sirsho dwaram. The nose is the only gateway to the brain.
Wow.
So that is preventative for, any kind of disorders, Alzheimer's, dementia, right? That's what the Ayurvedic world has seen and believes. It also helps your neck region, helps your jaws. Oil is very penetrating. You also can feel Nasia. If anybody who tries Nasia, Frank, they'll be able to feel it in their throat as well. Like even 2 drops. That's giving you the power of how far it can travel. So it also helps with like a post-nasal drip. So the benefits of Nasia, what I'm telling you, are probably 30% of all the benefits that are there. But if nothing else, just start for these benefits and then you can move on. It can be done pretty much any time of the day. The only thing we ask is don't go into the shower right after Nasia, and don't do it when you've just come out of the shower when your body is still resetting its temperature. If you drink alcohol, do not do Nasia after drinking alcohol.
So what is Nasia?
So Nasia are ayurvedic herbal oil drops. So they have certain herbs cooked in the oil. So I do want to tell people that herbs are not infused in the oil. There's a whole system, there's a process. So it's not something that you can say, I'm going to get these 5 herbs and make it home. No. Like the herbs are made into tea, and then the tea is added with the oil, the tea evaporates, and then the oil is left. So it's very, very carefully done. And these are specific herbs that are good for your brain health, that will help to decongest, that will help to rebuild the mucus lining, and you enjoy benefits. So this is one of the practices through which you look after your whole neck and head region.
So incredible. And it's so easy.
It's so easy. It's like, it's a 2-second practice.
Yeah. And then what about the rose water? Because that, for people to know too, it's simple. It's just literally pure organic rose water.
Yeah.
And I put it in a glass dropper and just in my eyes every morning and night. That one, I will say, like better than any eye drops I've used.
And like you said, that the Nasia's benefits, you'll see over a period of your life. You'll see it. And with the eye drops, right, because we're always on our screens. And one thing that makes that kind of compromises not only just your vision, but also your eyes are very connected. They're the gateway to your soul, but they're also, the ocular nerve is connected to your back, to your pituitary, to your pineal, right? And overheating the eyes kind of dries up that whole region. It affects the functioning of your master gland, of your pituitary. So we're always on a screen. We're always focused like this. I mean, anybody who's listening, I want you to think about the fact that before we had screens, before we had importance of this great academic, we were living in awe and wonder, which means that you are not focusing so hard in between your brows. You had to do a meditation, a tratak meditation to do that, because you were working in a way that was replenishing, relaxing the ocular nerve, because you were listening to the sounds of the birds and the mountains around you. You were feeling more. Now we are like focusing more. And when you're focusing more, you're creating all this heat in your ocular nerve. Plus we're on the screens, which are again blue light. So those rose water drops instantly go and they cool everything. And I want to tell everybody that don't underestimate, your eyes are not just for seeing, they're connected to your master pituitary. Your nose is not just for smelling or breathing, it's connected again to your brain. So you have deeper utilization of your senses. And these 2 practices help everything from like the peripheral to the deepest. It gives you all these benefits.
Wow, that's so interesting.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for watching, but also please don't forget to subscribe, because we're noticing in the analytics that some people are watching multiple videos but haven't subscribed yet, and it really helps me to continue to improve the show. One of those improvements is that this season I'm only having 1 sponsor for the entire season instead of 5. And it's Leela Quantum Technology. So they are the official sponsors of the Quite Frankly podcast. And I'm so excited because if you have followed me for a while, you know how much I love this technology. They have multiple third-party double-blind studies to show how this affects your health in a really positive way. But also the way I use it is I write my intentions on a piece of paper like this, and I put it in there, and it's now in the quantum field. So more about that in a bit, and thank you for watching. And I want to talk about something else, but I'm going to get to it later because you said it cools you. And my biggest thing was always, because I'm Pitta, which we'll talk about the doshas to people and explain what that is I'm so overheated a lot that I always want something that's going to cool me down. So the rose water has been amazing.
Love it.
Something that popped up into my mind too was intermittent fasting. And the reason why I bring that up is because, there's these trends that always happen in the wellness world. And one of them is this intermittent fasting. What I used to do, and I don't intermittent fast also because I'm so skinny that I was just like withering away when I did it, and
very intuitive.
Yeah.
No, very intuitively done.
I stopped doing it. And then what I also realized is, so what most people do, because they want to make it as easy as possible, they just skip breakfast. Okay, I woke up, I'll do all my stuff and I'll eat at noon or whatever. That's like what the majority of the people in the health world will tell you. When I took an ayurvedic course actually with Deepak Chopra a few years ago, and one of the things that we learned was the agni, the heat in your stomach, your digestive system, it goes with the sun. So it's the strongest in the afternoon. It's a little strong in the morning, but it gets strongest in the afternoon, and then it starts to go down. So you actually want to start eating less as the day goes off. So I'm like, I'm skipping breakfast when I should be eating, and I'm starving, by the way, when I wake up in the morning, And so tell me about that, and how we can start looking at nature and what's going on with the sun is actually what's also going on in the digestive.
Yeah, I love that. So these are two conversations, and I think we should have them both. One is the intermittent fasting, and one is how do you look at the sun, and then how do you organize your day according to the sun. So with the intermittent fasting, what does intermittent fasting do? Firstly, principally, it says, hey, I'm not going to eat, but the gastric juices will still be released. My body will still, what we call agni, the metabolic fire, will still burn. But when it doesn't have food to burn, it's going to then start burning toxins, which is a good thing, once it starts burning toxins. But when there's no toxins, it's going to burn tissue. And it's going to burn soft tissue, which my body cannot rebuild as an adult. Your myelin sheath around your nerves, some of your synovial fluid joints, all the softer tissues, mucus lining, and that's not what you want to burn, right? So intermittent fasting, and we'll talk about what intermittent fasting really is, because we need to define it again. Intermittent fasting means I stop eating, and I come from a tradition, Frank, where my family has done this for, I think, as long as it's existed, by the way, ancestrally, right? My parents, they stopped, not my dad, but my mom, my aunts, they'll all stop eating by, 6:30 sunset. This is where they live. And we can talk about how to modify it if you're interested when you're living in a place where the sunset is late, but they stop eating before sunset. And then they eat again in the morning once the sun rises. So it's a form of intermittent fasting. They've done it successfully, superb health. Nobody in my family, they have a bunch of 70-year-olds, has any chronic condition, no high blood pressure, no cholesterol, nothing, right? So that's the right way to do intermittent fasting. And I would say it's not really even a fast. That's how we're supposed to eat to begin with. And now we put a spin on it and we're calling it intermittent fast.
Right.
But some people can afford a larger fast. Who are those people? Who have toxins in their body? Because you want your agni or your metabolic fire to come up, but you wanted to eat your toxins. If you don't have toxins, if you're depleted, if you're skinny, that fire is going to come and start eating your mucus lining. It's going to come and eat your soft tissues. Intermittent fasting is not for you, for that kind of a person. So if you're depleted, if you're drier, if you're skinnier, it's dangerous. And I think when they talk about cardiovascular trouble and link it to intermittent fasting, it's when people have gone too far, when they've done cleansing their toxins and now they're actually cleansing out their tissues. And then, of course, what we call in Ayurveda the force of wind is going to make it to your heart. When there's space in your body, anything can happen, anything can enter. You are going to have cardiovascular trouble. It is understood. Things get drier and harder in your system. So it makes complete sense. And by the way, a few years ago, I did this video and I predicted exactly this, that it's going to give people heart trouble. Now we talk about, I do want to talk about breaking the fast as well, right? So the morning, let's start talking about the morning. We said 6 to 10. The sun is coming up. If you hear the birds are starting to chirp, you'll see the deer starting to forage for their morning, food. It's like when you're gradually, your agni is awakening gradually. When it's awakening gradually, the first thing you want to do in the morning is get your body moving. Build that heat inside of you first. And once it's built up nicely, then you want to give it a little bit of fuel. It's like, how you start a bonfire. You don't it just doesn't go to the peak right away. You have to feed it a little bit so that the fire is stable. So the morning time, the breakfast time, is useful for you to stabilize your fire. As it's coming up, you give it a little spark, ignite it a little bit. So that by the time you come to noon, as the sun is at its peak, as our minds are at the most focus, and everywhere in the world, most productive work happens between the hours of 10 and 2. That's when you can indulge in the largest meal, because it is with the sun and your body will be forgiving. You're working with the tide. Between 2 and 6, as the sun begins to set, and it becomes windy outside, right? As the humidity changes and it becomes drier, as it becomes windy outside, it becomes windy in our body. That's why people are yawning at 4 o'clock. People have a lull at 4 o'clock. They're stretching to get that wind out of their body. At that point, you're supposed to slow down, get some fresh air. That is your cue to begin to wind down the day. So of course, if people want, they can have a little bit of tulsi tea, do a little bit of breath work. And then ideally, I mean, till 200 years ago, we were not even eating dinner at night, right? We didn't have electricity. I don't think we were sitting around with lanterns, with a feast and, you know, trying to eat food. There was no such thing as I'm a nocturnal being. People were eating, you know, the idea of eating your soup or supper. So people had a lighter, warmer, more grounding meal at night, and then they would go to bed by the sun. And because between the hours of 10 and 2, because we're going to do the whole cycle, so you go to sleep by 10. Between the hours of 10 and 2, and now, you know, research in the West has also proven it, that you go into deeper sleep and your body starts to repair. So there's a phase of repair, everything from the day digestion, you process your thoughts. There's a lymphatic system which will remove debris that's created from just thinking creates debris that can be seen under a microscope.
Really?
And it's incredible because they can see that. They can see your glial cells in action doing it. And when you're sleeping, it gets cleared. Right? It gets flushed out. But once that repair happens, then rebuilding happens. So there's a little period, the dark of the night, the dead of the night is when rebuilding happens. Your growth hormone surges. So you want those hours of 10 and 2. Between 10, after that, right, when your body has done everything, cleansed, 2 and 6, it begins to slightly awaken. That's why when people who wake up at 11, let's just say you've gone to bed, and you wake up at 11, it's easier to go back to sleep. But if you wake up after 2 or 3, you get restless in bed because your body now has vacuum. It has a cleaner space. So the nervous system can get active. Yogis woke up at this time to say, I'm going to use this space to kind of invite, you know, to kind of open up my subconscious mind and invite downloads. Because at that point, there's an energy in the universe.
Is that why they say 3 a.m. is like the best time to wake up and meditate?
Brahma Muhurta, which is about 96 minutes before sunrise.
Oh, wow.
So like everything, and it's amazing actually, if you look at the Sanskrit text, they talk about I think this is before we knew that there were 365 days, how they had divided time. And it adds exactly to 365 days.
Really?
So it's pretty incredible. But those 96 minutes before sunrise, when everything is cleaned up and the universe, it's very quiet outside, that's when you wake up. And if you wake up and if you're not doing anything which is going to align your, you know, nervous system or open up your subconscious mind, you're going to get nervous and anxiety because there is space now and your thoughts will start racing. It's just, that is the nature of things. So you either stay asleep or you wake up to a practice, because if you're not and you're in between, great time to invite nervous system trouble that time. And then 6 o'clock again is when the world awakens. I mean, this is assuming that sunrise and sunset are from 6 to 6. And 6 o'clock the world awakens. And ideally you should have the urge to have a bowel movement because you're set up for that. There's a force of wind.
But can I ask something there?
Yeah,
Just so
absolutely.
I don't forget. Every morning when I wake up at 6 every morning. So between 5:30 and 6. And the first thing I do, so this is like something culturally like Lebanese people do, but I never really liked it. And it's mate. You drink hot mate. I put like some rose and lavender in it and some like coconut sugar.
What is mate? Tell me.
Yerba mate.
Okay, yeah, yerba mate. Okay.
But I do it like the authentic way. It's not like the canned.
Yeah,
it's
love
like
it. The mate itself,
and I put the hot water.
Love it.
And I drink it out of a copper mug. I do it not because of like culturally I like it, but because it makes me have bowel movements.
Yeah.
Like first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It's always like I drink 1 or 2 cups and I just need to go. You know.
Right.
But is that an okay thing to do?
So I'll tell you 1 cup is fine. I'll tell people to drink 1 cup
because
of.
It is caffeine.
Oh no,
That's
instead
why
mate has caffeine.
Yeah.
So you don't want to do caffeine. So it's more probably it's culturally passed down. It's not medicine. So some things are medicinally passed down, and some things are culturally passed down.
It's definitely cultural. 100%.
So this is culturally passed down. So you know, caffeine in the morning. It's like you don't want to just ignite your fire so sharp in the morning. You want to allow it to build up slowly, so it's a stable fire. So people who do caffeine in the morning, caffeine is hot and dry. It stimulates you like the sun and then it tires you like the sun. You know, the sun can wake you up. The sun can also want to make you hide into your basement, you know. So caffeine is like that. So you want to, but that being said, right, Frank, I tell everybody, listen, make the shifts that are working for you. You're doing a whole cup, do half a cup.
Yeah,
you're doing half a cup, add a little bit of milk into it because milk will cool it down because it's very hot and dry. Caffeine is very stimulating hot. I use the word hot and dry because stimulating can be a little confusing. And then add a little milk to it because that can cool it down, or add a little ghee to it. That's why bullet coffee became so popular, right? So you do something to kind of, you know, you create balance.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'll say everything is okay. You modify it, you change the timing, you meet yourself where you're at. But that's what you do. So morning, but ideally you want to have a natural peristaltic movement. And then again, your day starts 6 to 10. So that's the cycle of the day if you want to follow the sun.
Okay, cool. I know with people who drink coffee in the morning, because I don't really do that, but we always tell them, like in the health world, we say like first wake up, have electrolytes, like water with like electrolytes in it or something that's gonna, get you nourished and, like you said, hydrated, and then like wait an hour and have the coffee.
So I'll tell you in Ayurveda, your food, firstly, your mouth is not the only place through which you can nourish your body. We nourish the body through the skin. It's a channel of consumption. So the electrolytes that we're putting into our system, it's not really electrolytes, it's oil. So it's abhyanga. That is the first practice. One of the earlier practices in the morning, which is applying oil on your entire body. And that gets really well absorbed onto your skin because it's usually followed by movement. So you do oil first, and then you do movement, and then you shower. And when you do movement and your body warms up and channels open, that oil gets into your body and really nourishes deeper tissues. But you do not aggravate or start out your digestive system early in the morning, even through water, because your poor gastric juices, your poor Agni is trying to come up, and you don't want to be like, hey, let's have a snowstorm right at the, right. It's just summer, and you don't want to do that in the morning. Half a cup of water, which is hot, is fine, because you can never guzzle hot water. You will always sip hot water. You just can't do it. So that's fine. Half a cup, no problem. But water with electrolytes, see, these are all short-term solutions. You feel hydrated for that day, but it's long-term. If that food, like the first function of food is not to nourish you, it's not even to give you nutrients, but to make sure that the environment of the gut, the climate of the gut, does not get damaged.
Hey, I just really quickly want to tell you about the necklace that I'm wearing. You might see me wearing it in a lot of these episodes. I actually give it to many of the guests too. They're from Leela Quantum technology, and as you can see, there are little capsules inside that are supercharged with what they call quantum energy. And it's just like walking around with one of the full-sized infinity blocks with you wherever you go. So you can get those on the website too and be quantumly upgraded wherever you go.
The gut is just like a garden, right? So I mean, if you say I'm going to plant this one seed, but it's going to ruin all my other foliage, it's like it's this amazing fruit, and this fruit is, it's going to do these miraculous things, but it's going to ruin everything else in the garden. So that's how some of these hypernutrients are, that they ruin your foliage. And we actually call it flora and fauna. Right? We call the probiotic environment flora and fauna. So the first function is, what is this going to do to the environment of my gut? And the environment of the gut is warm and moist, and you can probably relate to that because that's where a good garden grows, where it's warm and moist, the sun and moisture.
Okay, wow. I have so much I want to say about that, but God, I think I'm going to skip ahead though. So do you think that there's a paradigm shift that's happening in the world of wellness?
So there is a start maybe of a consciousness. I think what has happened from being, wisdom was passed on, right? Information was not passed on. When you got something from, it used to be called indigenous wisdom, that you got it. We've come to an era of information. We don't care about wisdom anymore, but wisdom is what lives within you. It has your inquiry, it has your insight, it has your experience. And when you pass on wisdom, it stays and you pass it on. Information is here today, and it's just very much on the surface. It's very overwhelming and scary because you've not internalized it. The world today is consuming excessive amounts of information, more than we can digest and process. As a result, we're losing faith in our own ability, in our own wisdom, because we have no time to tap into our wisdom. And that being said, Ayurveda says that the first cause of disease is loss of wisdom, pradnya aparadha.
Wow.
So if you're losing wisdom, you're going to get sick. So I think that was the big emerging problem in the world. And then the pandemic happened. And I think that led people to question that I'm consuming all this information and it feels good in the short term, but it's really making me lose my own senses. And I'm hoping that, because you and I are both part of the conscious world, we see that. But it's not even 0.0001% of where it needs to be. But what I'm going to feel hopeful about is that you and I can have this conversation today, and we can have people wanting to listen to this conversation, which would not happen 10 years ago.
It's interesting what you said about in like is related to food or consciousness, but even in like spirituality and in that whole world, there's so much information. Like people think they need to be doing this and that and this practice and this kriya and this yoga and this meditation, but also should be doing ice plunges and it's just like so much. And that's why I actually took this entire year off from speaking at any events, anything, and I'm just writing this book where it's like, here are the 10 fundamental principles, and then you can create your practice or whatever around that. But these are just like 10 universal ancient truths. You know what I mean? Instead of saying, hey, this should be your routine, you add this and this and this, because it might be different for me and for you.
I am
as long
so
as you
with
know
you.
That truth, right?
That you know, that's so funny. That's how I bring people into this Ayurvedic practice, aligning mind and body. I give them 3 principles, and I'm like, you just know the principles.
Your 3 cosmic principles, right?
And I'm like, I give you the principles, you create the practices. You know, and it doesn't matter what practice, doesn't matter where you live. It's timeless. It's universal. You know, these are just 3 principles, and and you're good to go. And then I, of course, will help people to go through them. But I'm so with you, right? Because it's like we've gone into a noisy bazaar.
And no one knows where to start, and then they get like overwhelmed, and they don't, you know, they'll try this, they'll try that, and then they just stop.
And it's like going into a mall, right, which I find very scary, by the way.
Same.
And it's like a mall with 1,000 vendors, and each one louder than the other, trying to sell you merchandise, and you're so confused. But if you know who you are, like if you're going to the same mall and say, I need to buy a white shirt in this size of this fabric, you know everything else is noise. So again, it's coming back to you. Who are you? What is your wisdom? It is so easy to disconnect from the noise when you're connected to yourself.
So I know you have a course, I think it's like a 21-day course where you talk about those 3 cosmic principles. Do you want to touch a little bit on those?
If that's where you think the conversation is going, if you want to talk about anything else, I'm happy to do whatever it goes.
I want to know a little bit about what are these 3 cosmic principles that you can apply to any part of your life. But I know because you teach a course, like there's probably, it's like you can really go deep into each one. So maybe just a little bit about what are these principles.
And Frank, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, oh, this can go quite deep.
No, just like bullet points. What are they?
So the goal of the program is to tap into what your body already knows. And that is through this cosmic alignment, because there's laws of nature apply to everything, as above, so below. And that's also the Vedic principle that I really tap into. So it's like, how do you bring your wisdom back through this principle? The first principle, which is again a method that I've created, which is the biggest principle, which is that there is a return to your optimum inner climate. So there is a certain climate, right? You'll buy a plant, the first thing you'll ask how much sunlight it needs, how much water it needs, right? Those are the first 2 questions you ask. So we know for everything to live and thrive, there is a climate. Our body is a universe to trillions of microorganisms. You know, we know that. If they live well, we live well. They do all the tasks that need to be done. So there is an optimum inner climate. What is that optimum inner climate? So Frank, you and I are going to do this, okay?
Okay.
Can you take your palm? Can you exhale into it a few times? Like just cup it around. Yeah, exhale. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Was that warm? Was it cold? You have to cup it well. Like just, yeah. Like with a nice long exhale is fine.
It's like medium. Warmish.
Yeah. Was it dry? Was it
no.
Moist?
Moist.
Okay, that's warm and moist.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about our blood. It's warm, cold. We are warm-blooded mammals.
Warm-blooded, yeah.
So it's warm and it's moist. Right? If you're going for a blood test, you touch the test tube, it's warm and moist. I know I've nursed 2 children. Mother's milk is warm and moist. Our reproductive fluids are warm and moist. Our urine is warm and moist. If one day you go pee and you realize it's hot, you're gonna, what's happening, right? It's never cold, it's warm and moist, right? Life exists on the planet because there's a balance of the sun and moon, right? The sun brings the heat and the moon brings the moisture. So it's warm and moist. So any place, right? So the optimum inner climate, and I'm going to give you some more examples. The probiotic environment, right? It's warm and moist because it's good bacteria. Good bacteria happens in Florida in March. Warm and moist. It goes hot and humid, you have inflammation, all these other tropical diseases, candida, etc. It goes cold and dry. People say, oh, the body, there's no microbiome in there. Cold and dry, depleted, microbiome is affected. Hot and dry, hot desert. just heat rash, sunburn. So it's all those symptoms, right? So your optimum inner climate is warm and moist. Doesn't matter where you are. And even emotionally, right? So Frank, we'll talk about this. What do you, anger, if you had to put a temperature on anger?
For me or in general?
Just in general.
Like 10. Right.
But yeah, is it hot or cold?
Hot.
And it's hot.
Yeah.
Okay. Anxiety, dry or moist?
Dry.
Dry. Anxiety, anybody who has a lot of anxiety will see that the eyes start drying, everything starts drying, right? So every emotion, like depression is humid, it's sluggish. But love is warm and moist. Gratitude is warm and moist. Compassion is warm and moist. We all gravitate towards warm and moist people. Hot relationships burn out. Cold relationships go nowhere. And it's the same exact principles. You're a hot person, you'll burn out. You're a cold, stagnant person, you won't be progressing in your life. But if you stay in the warm and moist, so how do you bring warm and moist? So that first principle is I teach people to bring warm and moist to every single areas of their life, including their triggers, right? Like every time you have a trigger, you feel hot and dry inside, like hot and racy. So we bring warm and moist to everything across the board. That's the first principle. The second principle is live according to the circadian rhythm. And the third principle is the cycles of building, transformation, and decline are natural and normal, and they're everywhere in the universe. Spring will build, summer will transform, winter will decline. As a child, you build. In your youth years, there is transformation, and then there is a decay. A fruit will ripen to its fullest, and building is always more moist and juicy. You know, a young child just growing. Transformation is always hot and warm. And then decay and decline is always drying. Autumn is dry. A fruit that decays just shrivels up. Human beings, when we decay, we shrivel up.
I heard you say drying is dying.
But if you want to dry in your transformation phase, then you dry. Then it's killing yourself, because in your transformation phase, you want to be ripe and juicy. You want your fruit to stay ripe. You want your summer to be juicy. If it's a hot and dry summer, you'll hit autumn too quickly. It'll dry out the air, it'll dry out the plants, and everything will dry out very quickly. So you don't, in your transformation, it's juicy and it's hot. It's warm, you know? And
when you say transformation, what do you mean by that?
So the three phases, right? Building is the phase where anything is growing in size, right? So very rapid proliferation of cells. Transformation is come to full size. A relationship even, it's come to its full size. And transformation is you can actually now do things, create. Any transformation requires heat. So for a human being, it's adolescence. So it's the heat that adolescence, or hot hormones. You can create in your work outside, you can procreate because you're ripe. That is the time the earth has use for us. Like technically we're all born because the earth wants us to reproduce, but that's the transformation. We can eat the fruit only when it's ripe. You know, so it's that ripened phase. But on the other side of ripeness is decay. And this is a universal truth, and you see it everywhere. Embracing it and understanding it means that you honor these cycles, you don't expedite any of them, and you don't run away from any of them. So when people talk about longevity, it's when you enhance how you go through these cycles, yet knowing that there is a decay at the end. But you can enhance, you can elongate that transformation period. So you can stay creative much more. So how do you do that? Yet you know that the decay is inevitable. Because just on the other side of productivity, of reproductivity, right? On the other side of reproductivity, the earth has no use for us. It's like when cells will stop working in our body, we want them flushed out. That's how the universe views us as humans, right?
Wow.
They're like, you're on the other side of your reproductive years. I'll give you a few more. You do some inner work, but then I need you to be out, so I need to make space for more. And the same thing is true for relationships, right? If you don't continue to build and transform, you will start decaying.
So are we kind of like the microbiome for the earth?
We are the microbiome for the earth. That's exactly what we are.
Wow.
And that's why macrobiotic diets, which is fermentation. No, I even like fermentation, right? Macrobiotic is fermentation is also warm and moist, right? That's the exact process. You feel it if you ever fermented something. You feel the warmth and moisture. It can be a little hot and humid for some people because their bodies we're already too hot these days. So I teach people, all these three cycles. I do want to say, Frank, because I know that you are, you are a believer of this. The only place where you don't see this building transformation and decline is when you are in a path of unfolding yourself. Because there is building, there's transformation, there is endless transformation, and then there's dissolution.
Yeah.
And there's no decay or decline.
Yeah.
So I tell people, when you're on the other side of your youth, you know, you want to focus on this transformation within, so then there's a dissolution of self.
So maybe for people who don't fully grasp what you're saying, it's like you understand that the body is decaying, but I'm not the body, right? So it's like, it's dissolution. It's like taking off a sweater or a jacket, but I'm not associating with the body that's decaying.
Exactly. That I have honored it while it was my, you know, it's my vehicle, and it has, and I'm honoring it, and that's what, you know, elongating that period is, and honoring that period. But when it has its journey, I will honor its journey. But my soul is still inside working on a different on a disentanglement of self. Because we are all like wound up, like through the course of our lives. It's like, you know, if you have like a string and you're just tying a knot and tying a knot and tying a knot. So in that period, I'm taking time to open all my knots, to undo everything. So all that I have left in that stage then is dissolution.
I was trying to think in my book how to describe that in a way that's like, you know, relatable.
Easy to understand, yeah.
And I kind of described it as like a farmer who uses a tool or like a shovel, right? And they honor it, they take care of it, they polish it, but they don't think I am the shovel. Like, it's still an extension of me. It's still an extension. It's something I'm utilizing to take care of my land, but I am not that shovel.
That is beautiful.
You know, so it's like that. Like, we'll utilize this body, take care of it, do all the things for it, but never like look in the mirror and be like, that is me.
Me. Oh, I love it. Yeah. So like, you know, I think, you know, so then the spiritual realm, like the kind of work is like the inner world is more real than the outer world. Right? And in the world of the body, the outer world is more real than the inner world. But with these three principles, you can align both. It becomes the bridge between the body and the spirit, because they all, even in your spirit, you want warm and moist, you want compassion, you want gratitude, you want things to flow. Even in your digestion, you want warm and moist. Even in your reproduction, you want warm and moist. Otherwise, your eggs, you know, the eggs will burn out. You want warm and moist in your brain so you can continue to create and produce. So I teach people in 21 days how to start shifting everything to warm and moist.
I think I had a lot of like dryness before, and then when I started to kind of implement the very little that I know with Ayurveda, is just the oils. Just utilizing oils alone makes such a massive difference. And I think it was, I don't know who it was that told me, like in Ayurveda, you put oil in every opening in the body. Ears, eyes, mouth, nostrils, like belly button,
everywhere.
Anus, like everywhere, if you're using like, you know, douches or cleanses, but it's every opening in the body.
You know, that's like one of my, like, that's not in my program, but that's one of the three things that I say that you want to do is oil your body, oil on your body, ghee in your body. And oil again, right, Frank? Oil is moist or dry? Moist. Oil comes from seeds. In Ayurveda, the only oils you use is ones that come from seed. Seeds carry inherent potent warmth, because seeds have to transform very quickly.
Interesting.
So the oil is also warm and moist. I also want to say it's a place where all the three doshas are balanced.
So for people who don't know what a dosha is too, right?
Okay.
There's pitta, which I am, kapha, and vata.
Yeah.
And so you can describe this way better, but pitta, usually hot. Like people who get really hot, they have tempers, fiery, maybe personality even, oily skin. Vata is like light and airy, petite people. I don't know much more than that. Kapha is like think of a stone, right? Like they usually are round, very smooth skin, they're cold, slow moving, lazy.
Right. So that's the conventional understanding of the doshas, right? And it's a great place to start. But really what doshas are, like we have all three, by the way.
Yeah, everybody has all
three doshas, because you could not function, right? But you know I talked about the three phases, the building, transformation, and decline. So we need kapha. Kapha helps us to build. So kapha is moist, juicy, allows for growth. Kapha, dosha are all elements in your body that allow you to build. Pitta dosha are all elements in your body, like your digestive fire, like your reproductive, like your nervous system, that allow you to transform, that are hot. right? You have to transform, your thoughts need to process, your food needs to be digested, your reproductive system is active. Your mitochondria of your cell, which is the powerhouse. So any of those hot, warm, transformative elements are pitta elements. And then movement is required in your body throughout. Movement and decay is required. So that is all those that create movement and decay. Oh, the cell is dying, let it out of the body. This is, waste from the food, let's, get a bowel movement.
The blood is moving.
Blood is moving, everything
Vata?
is moving. Yeah, that's vata, right? And it kind of creates elimination, decline, movement. So the 3 cycles that we talked about, the building, transformation, decline, we all want them at an appropriate rate. You don't want to build more. But if you are building more and your body has an exaggerated sense of building, like everything is stored, everything is built, you have a kapha tendency. If your body is hotter and snappier and more like, heat everywhere, then you have a pitta tendency. If your body is decaying more than it's building, it's depleting more than it's building, and people who usually have that tendency, which people will say, I'm a vata, but really you're not a vata, you're all 3.
Right,
but your body is depleting more. So I like to, even though I'm a junkie for Sanskrit, but I've deliberately moved into this jargon that people can understand better. So building, if you're exaggerated building, exaggerated heat and transformation, or exaggerated depletion and movement. And then people who are vata, well, they'll move, they'll be scatterbrained, their bodies cannot build well because before it can build, it's out of the system. So people could have tendencies exaggerated, but the right place, the place where kapha is not building excessively, pitta is not burning excessively, and vata is not moving and drying excessively, that place is warm and moist. So if you actually do an analysis of the properties of all of these doshas, there's only one place where none of the doshas are imbalanced. If it was too hot, pitta would be imbalanced. Too cold, kapha would be imbalanced. Too dry, vata would be imbalanced. Too humid, kapha would be imbalanced. Warm and moist is where everything is in balance.
You always go back to that, warm and moist.
You just go back. I have people in my programs who've tattooed warm and moist. They're like, it's just changed everything in our lives.
I guess I'm trying to make it more relatable though. So how does everybody know? Because with every decision you make, like I'm eating an apple or I'm taking neem in the morning or whatever, how do you always know that you're being warm and moist?
So that's why all the 3 principles come in, right? Because so if it's like in the middle of the day when it's really hot outside, it is okay to indulge in something a little bit cooler. Otherwise your foods, so we learn to apply this to all areas of your life. Your food is always warm and moist. Like this drink you made me right now is what you would say warm and moist. If you look at any Ayurvedic recipe, Frank, it always starts with taking a good fat, ghee, putting spices in it right there and then, and putting warm and moist.
It's interesting because I had, it was Dr. Naram, who I told you about before we started, who he was telling me, he was like, Frank, always cook your food. Like, don't eat raw veggies. Do not eat raw. But, there's all these like people who are like wild about, raw food diet, raw vegetables, raw fruit, raw everything. But he was like, even if you just simmer it a little bit, it needs that. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, and Frank, it's exactly that, right? What happens when you cook a food? Water is released. You warm it, moisture is released. And that you make it warm and moist. Right? And of course, you always cook it in a fat, which are even enhancing, and you put spices. So it's the epitome of warm and moist in Ayurvedic food. So you always, also I want to talk about raw food, right? Like we've become so short-term in our vision. We forget to study from our history and we forget to think about our future. But if you look at the evolution of humankind, we were just as animals as all the other animals are. Then what led to this change?
Fire.
Is the introduction of fire. When we started cooking our brains, the gut microbiome changed. And we didn't need to do that much work anymore to digest the food. And the gut microbiome changed, and then the brain expanded and became bigger and had all this special functioning because now we had extra energy. So that microbiome happens when you cook food. Gandhi went a little bit rawish for a little period and vegan. And there was more the raw food. He developed cholera, which is like real dysbiosis in the gut bacteria. So he went back to cooking his foods, Unfortunately, there was a recent raw blogger who passed away because she had such severe dysentery. Because what will happen, yes, your nutrient intake That's the third function of food, is nutrient. First is, what does this do to the environment of my gut? What does this do to my warm and moist? Because if it ruins that, it's not going to. Second is nourishment. And the third is getting your nutrients right.
So no salads?
No salads.
Yeah, and I actually never crave salads, so I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I mean, can anybody imagine living in an orchard? It may be beautiful, but thriving forever just plucking fruit and eating those leaves? You can't. But traditionally, cultures that thrived on a little bit of salad, like in Greek, little bit of salad, always paired with warm and moist. Oil,
yeah.
vinegar, got in the moisture, vinegar is hot, or lemon juice. They always got warm and moist in that. In fact, all traditional foods were balanced with warm and moist. I've looked at it, I've studied it, I'm a junkie for this. Any tradition that has thrived, if you look at the blue zones, I'm like, these people lived ayurvedically. Like, they did all of these principles.
Really?
Right?
Yeah.
So you just have to live with what you know. I find it funny because we read about the blue zones, we watch the movie, the Netflix documentary. What we've completely missed is that these people didn't go scouting looking at trends. They just stayed with what they knew. They probably ate like less than 10 foods on a daily basis and maybe 20, otherwise. They didn't, that's it, the palate just had that. So, and yet we go scouting for everything everywhere else. Just stay with what, like my whole mantra is your body already knows, So you just want to, and if you're confused, your body has lost its way, I get it, there's too much information, just these 3 principles will bring you back home.
Hey, did you know that you're walking around like a radio tower, just broadcasting out these messages and frequencies on a subconscious level? And some of those broadcasts are negative, and they could be affecting the way people see you, the way people treat you. Did you also know that you're never upset for the reason that you think you're upset? We're also walking around with these trapped emotions, trapped old traumas from things that have happened to us in our past. And that's what I clear for people when they come and work with me one-on-one. We look for the subconscious blocks that are affecting you, and I clear them. Most people report the next day, if not that same day, they feel lighter, they feel happier, they feel free. And a lot of times you can check out the testimonials on my website to see people resolve physical illnesses and physical traumas like restless leg syndrome, eye pressure problems, cold feet, cold hands, anxiety. All of these things are things that I've seen get cleared when people work with me. It's all done on an energetic level. And the best part is that it's done remotely from the comfort of your home. We just get on a Zoom call, and in 30 minutes, you can experience what feels like 10 years of therapy. So if you're curious, go to www.frankelaridi.com, and I cannot wait to work with you. Yeah, it's so interesting because the trends thing, it applies to everything too. I had a friend on the show, she does like lymphatic drainage for people. And she was saying she used to be a model and she was in New York, and they wanted her, she's Asian and she has these big cheeks, and she's Asian and Spanish. They wanted her to take her buccal fat out. And they told her like her cheek fat, and she didn't do it. She was like, I'm not going to follow a trend, like that's crazy. And now she's in her 30s and she's like, Frank, I'm so glad I didn't do it, because it's like what makes me look youthful in my 30s. Everyone thinks I look so young. That gaunt look, because it's a trend. It's so silly. It's like what you're saying now. It's like, don't just follow the trend of whatever right now. It's like everyone's eating liver or whatever it is at the moment, you know? Or like you mentioned blue zones, suddenly everybody was eating purple yams. Like, that's what they eat in Okinawa. But that's Okinawa. It was about how they're doing it, how they're living, right?
Also like identifying things with those properties where you live. Like they forget the seasonal local aspect of it. They forget that these people don't travel and scout all day. They don't worry. They sit and have tea with their friends. So you want to pick the right aspects of everything. I tell everybody, think about your life 10 years from today. And it's about how you want to wake up feeling. You want to always wake up feeling inspired, and you want to sleep feeling fulfilled. If you're doing everything that you're doing today, will that happen for you in 10 years? Because your body will anyways decay. Doesn't matter what you do. Your body will anyways decay. So it's not about how you look, how do you feel, and how do you want to feel in 10 years from now. And if you can do what you're doing and feel like it's going to get you there, go for it.
It's interesting because you also mentioned like, moist a lot, and people would think, oh, I'll just drink a lot of water. And I know that you say, that's your reaction is that water is not hydrating, which like people think those two things together. You're like, what do you mean? So explain that. I mean, I know what you mean, but explain it for people who are listening.
So like the first thing I tell people is if you go for a really long bath, and you're in the water, do you feel hydrated? Does your skin feel hydrated? We hydrate through osmosis.
It shrivels up, right?
It shrivels up because our body hydrates through osmosis, right? It's like how much water can permeate on the other side. Osmosis is a process through which, depending on the solute, the salt concentrate on two sides of the membrane, what can pass through. So when you drink water, firstly, it goes to your stomach. That's the first place it goes to. It dilutes all the gastric juices. Then it goes to your small intestine for absorption. When we drink large amounts of water, it's large dilution of gastric juices going into your small intestine, can't even be absorbed very well. The kidney feels like there's an emergency and it needs to flush everything out. A lot of thriving traditional cultures. So, firstly, Ayurveda, according to Ayurveda, and this makes sense to me, that the food has to be always semi-solid. That's warm and moist, usually cooked semi-solid foods. And they're salted, right? So there's already water content in your foods. And then when you have it and your body is digesting and that excess water is being absorbed, your bowels will be formed well. That water which has salt, because it has salt, it gets absorbed much better because it's water with your food. Best way. But that's not...
Water with the food is best?
No, so water that's in the food already, cooked in the food, like a soup, like a khichdi, something that's cooked, that's the water that's cooked, because your foods are semi-solid, they're always soft. You always want your foods to be soft, great way. But beyond that, of course I get it, always warm water, hot, hottish if your body does not react to hot, but warm to hot water. I personally fill a flask in the morning, 16 ounce, because you will never guzzle it down. You can never drink water. You have to sip water. So when you sip it, it's not going to dilute your gastric juices. It's going to get absorbed in your small intestine because it has to pass the stomach. It has to pass the test of the stomach before it goes to the small intestine. And you're not going to have this massive monsoon cloud burst in your warm and moist gut. So you drink water to thirst. Yes, that there are times when there's summer and you sweat and you want more, go for it. But drinking excess amounts of water at any point is going to, in one shot, is going to create imbalance. You're talking a lot, drink a few sips, no problem. Drink infused water with herbs warm all day long, no problem. But you want to finish your water consumption mainly by 4 o'clock. After that, your body needs less water and you want to give it less water after that. You kind of only want to drink just to thirst.
Because the fire is already out. You don't need to add more, right?
Exactly. Otherwise, where water stagnates very quickly. If you leave water in your bathtub and you leave for a vacation, you're going to come back, it's going to become sticky. So water stagnates. And if you're going to drink water and you can't process it, people can have candida because of excess water consumption.
I'm going to add this to, it's interesting, I told you the book that I'm writing, it's only 10 chapters, but it's a book about spirituality, and the first chapter is about water.
Oh, wow.
And I grew up, as you probably did, only drinking warm water, or my mom also would tell us, like, sip it, don't drink cold water. But a big thing they would pray over the water, like 7 times if we had a headache or something, and then we would drink it.
Oh, wow.
It would go away. It was like a little teacup of water, and they would say this very specific prayer 7 times. Sometimes they would pass it around, all the sisters, like my mom, my aunts, and then we would drink it. And it was wild. Like our headache would go away, whatever it was that we needed. One time I had a sty, and I drank it, and it literally burst.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
The pus started to come out.
Oh my goodness. That's very powerful. That is very powerful.
I already had one twice. For some reason that year I had 3, and I've never had them ever since before. I had 3 in 1 year. I had them surgically removed the first 2 times. The third time I'm almost like, no, I'm not doing this again.
Let's do the water.
Prayer, I drank it and it started to ooze.
Oh my God.
So my whole first chapter is about water, and I'm going to add this now, and of course I'll credit you for what you just said about like how to consume the water, how it's not hydrating.
Yeah, and it is so believable, by the way, what you said, because water holds energy. So when you do mantras, like when you chant mantras, like when babies are born, you keep a pot of water behind their house and you chant mantras into it and you keep it. When you enter a new house, you take a little pot of water, you take a little pot of water and you chant mantras, because water can hold energy.
When you move into a new house?
Yeah, so there are a lot of traditions, like even if you're doing a puja, like a prayer ritual, you always work with water, and the only reason is because water will store that energy.
Yeah.
So sound is a vibration, it'll create vibration in the water and it'll contain it there. So now you're containing that energy. It's not going to be, it's going to stay. So it makes complete sense what you said. Like
and this is stuff your ancestors were doing, my ancestors were doing. But what's cool is that now science is like taking photos of the water and seeing what they've always said.
I love that. And this morning I was somewhere and they said, oh, there are studies happening that sound can actually heal, and there's a whole branch in Ayurveda called Raga Chikitsa, which is that ragas, which are those notes, the 7 notes from do, which is in the Indian, it's like Sa Re Ga Ma Pa Da, it's the same thing. They correspond to the 7 chakras. And depending on the sound, a chakra will be stimulated. But listening to certain there are ragas, they're like musical compositions for the morning time, for the evening time. So depending on what's happening in your own body and the neurotransmitters, that sound can create healing. So yeah, and I love, so basically, linking back, and now they're doing studies without knowing even that this is there. So I love that science is coming back to it. Right. So you're right, in the paradigm shift, this is it's a potential for a great awakening for those who are ready for it.
Aren't we in, speaking of that, aren't we in, or we just moved into something like Dwarpa Yuga, which is like the age of energy? Some people say we're in Kali Yuga.
Kali Yuga.
I don't believe we're in Kali Yuga.
So I'll tell you the opportunity.
To the yogic science, we're not. Sorry, the actual book. The book called The Yogic Science by,
the book.
Not Paramahansa Yogananda, his teacher, Sri Yeshwatar. It's called the Science, Yoga Science, something like that. But the way he describes it is that we're actually in Dwarpa Yuga now.
So everything that I have studied and understood, and then I look at some of the other, I have friends not in the Vedic wisdom world, but I understand it's Kali Yuga, and also like Jain philosophy. I was raised in a tradition called Jainism.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And I had access to Jain, Buddhist, and Hindu philosophies are right in my household, libraries of all of them and mentors for all of them. But anyways, that being said, all of these traditions, and you know why that makes sense to me. So one of the work that happens in Kali Yuga is that, of course, you see mass destruction, but people get filtered out. It's a time of filtering. However, the journey you can make with consciousness is really rapid in the Kali Yuga. And in my Jain culture, we call it the era of Dukh. Dukh is, sadness, grief, destruction. So it's that in this era, people can travel a lot. Your soul can travel very quickly. In some of the other yugas, you actually can't travel as quickly. You have to be in another realm to travel.
And we are traveling really quickly.
We are traveling really
through consciousness, right?
Yeah, consciousness can travel.
It's happening fast.
Yeah.
But the only reason I challenge you a little bit on that is because Kali Yuga. So for people who are listening, I actually have episodes on this.
Yeah. Oh wow! Wow!
I know. But there's these are cycles of life.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of not controversy, but people say some are 7,000, other people say no, they're 300,000 years long. But what I see is in Kali Yuga, it's the dark ages, but we have moved out of Vikings killing each other in the streets and just, chopping heads everywhere you go. And you know what I mean? There's destruction, there's war, but it's actually the most peace we've ever had in the last couple thousand years. Wait, and then just one thing. Then with Dwarpa Yuga, it's the age of humanity understanding energy work again, sound healing. The work, what I do is a job is just, it's the podcasting is nice. I love doing it, but I'm actually an energy healer. And that's what people come to me for, know? And so I feel that only is coming into awareness now because we're in that age, no? Could that happen in Kali Yuga?
Yeah, that work starts in Kali Yuga. The conscious individuals, they take it on to Dwapar, because that's
so
and of course
leading the way for everybody else.
And then of course, Frank, you and I can have a different understanding. And I say whatever resonates with you. That's my entire life work. Is that meet yourself where you're at, but because I love two conscious individuals bringing their truths in one place. So I'll tell you, this is my understanding of it, right? That in Kali Yuga, you're not working from your primitive, your mind has gotten distorted. When the Vikings were killing each other, we were animalistic, we were in the primitive. And right now we're evolved beings, we're intellectual beings, we have access, and their mind is destroyed. Crime is not because we want to conquer territories. There is so much crime because your mind doesn't know. So when the mind is affected, what darkness can be more than that? Hunger and poverty is Maslow's hierarchy, hunger and poverty, okay, they're like survival problems. Here we can be in a place where there's no survival problems and you're yet in darkness.
Right. Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but the conscious individuals will take humanity to the Dwapar. And they will start rebuilding. And that's why I tell everybody that this is a time of inner activism. Buddha brought something into the world 5,000 years later, or people can argue 2,000 years later, we're still learning from what he taught. And your work, and he just worked on himself. That's all he did.
Yeah.
Inner activism.
But there is no one else.
No, but you do it yourself. That's what I tell my girls. Because in this era, the challenge and the great part about this era is you have to do your work while you're at home. You cannot run away in the jungles. There are no jungles. There's nothing. You got to be here and do that same work while you're living your everyday life. And when you do the inner activism work, you cross that portal quicker. So that's how I even raise my daughters, that you want to do that conscious work and take it with you to the next.
Does Ayurveda have an actual system for raising children, or tidbits? Because I know it's a life science. It's not just food. We think of it as like a diet science, but there's so much more to it. Because I do there's some spiritual teachers in the Indian tradition who have said, don't raise your child. Your child doesn't need to be raised. Just create the environment for them to show you who they are.
This is exactly what I say. With the water and sunlight, the rain doesn't have to change. It's like the rain and the sunlight very far away, and the plant will blossom. So I was like, this concept of raising your child is really new. Children don't get raised, they grow. They bloom, they blossom. You just have to be water and sunlight. You're just a catalyst. And again, water and sunlight, warmth and moisture. I'm just saying that there again.
I'm going to get the tattoo, warm and moist. It's true though, that's what makes you feel the best when you even think of those words. You don't dry, hot, you just want warm and moist. Warm and moist.
And that's why even Gibran resonates with me, right? For the kids you're talking about, let them, that they come through you, they're not for you. And yet, there's a whole section of Bala Roga. I can tell you my daughters are 16 and 11, Frank, and I was immersed in Ayurveda. That's how I grew up, because my grandfather, but it's taught like a first language. So when it's the first language, you don't know that you've learned it. In fact, I always say that for us growing up, health was just the freedom of being well. It was not the fear of disease. And when you raise your children in that environment, they're not afraid of disease.
What do you want to leave people with? What's a final thing that anyone can relate to right now?
Anyone can relate to right now. Now I'll talk about Ayurveda, and I can leave 3 simple Ayurvedic tips. And use them for your mind, use them for your body, use them for everything, right? Make sure that everything that enters your life is warm and it's moist. In terms of your food, it's cooked, and it has good fats, it has good spices, the relationships are warm and moist. So just make sure that happens. You don't exercise to the point of burnout, you exercise to the point of warmth. You don't exercise to the point of dryness, you exercise to the point of... So just apply these principles, make them yours. Know that you already know them, your body knows. That's the first, okay? The second I'm going to say is, when in doubt, just look at the sun and the moon, look at their cycles. But if you're living in the summer solstice in Iceland, do not do that. It's to work at a 6 a.m., 6 p.m. imagination. But live like that. There's a lot to learn. And the third thing I'll say is oil on your body and ghee in your body.
Ghee, for people who don't know, is like butter, but it's clarified butter or unclarified butter.
It is clarified butter, but really what it is, it's cultured butter. And the culturing...
Is it cultured?
Original ghee is only cultured.
So it's like living.
So, you add a culture to it. So you basically take yogurt culture. Yeah, most people don't know that. And that's why I want to bring the right understanding of ghee to the world, because people are consuming kind of hydrogenated fat sometimes in the name of ghee. But basically, like saturated fat. So basically, unless it's cultured, it is not the right ghee. And again, Frank, culturing is fermentation. It's bringing in the warmth and moisture. So you're bringing in the warmth and moisture, you're cooking the ghee, you're letting the solids that do not get broken down. Even if you ever make ghee, there are solids in milk, the lactose and the casein, that do not get broken down even with the flame, and they float to the top. You flush them out. And it's lactose free, it's casein free, and it's cultured. So it has its warmth and moist.
So ghee in the body. Okay.
It is ghee in the
I'm
body.
going to show you mine on the way out and see if you can tell me if it's the right one.
Cultured. Yeah, I've looked at some brands in the US, so I'll take a look.
All right, thank you.
But yeah, that's it. And just know that your body knows that even though this information sounded like a lot, you don't have to do it all. These are just, I'm planting seeds.
Just understand the wisdom, right?
Just plant, yeah. These are just seeds that are planted. Whatever needs to be watered will be watered. You'll hear it again sometime next week. You'll make some connection in your own life. So wait for that to happen. Don't jump at everything all at once.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
How can people find you? I'm going to have all the links, of course, in the description, but how can they find you?
They can find me on my, if you want little tidbits, find me on my Instagram, which is my _Ayurvedic_life. If you want to go deeper and you want to know about all my work, go to my website, Nidhi, that's my first name, NIDHI.me, me.
Perfect.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you.
Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my debt don't extend me on my dividends. If it did, I'd have to keep pivoting. Turn the other cheek and down another dose of adrenaline. I don't need to pretend to